Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about NBA hell and NBA purgatory, which I don't think is quite the right metaphor. NBA purgatory is typically used to refer to a team that's never good enough to win a playoff series, but also never bad enough to get a high draft pick. In Catholicism, purgatory is a place you go after you die, then you suffer for all your sins, and then you go to heaven, which to me would sound a little more like the rebuilding phase, right? Which I talked about last week if you want to check that out. So a team entering purgatory to me has a decent roster, but has made some poor decisions along the way, and has decided to give up on near future success, so they can suffer at the bottom of the league for a while before ascending into basketball heaven. Ideally, more often than not, they just repeat the cycle. So let's start with a team that's considered to be in NBA purgatory right now, the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls are suffering right now because they're supposed to be good. They're supposed to be at the peak of their powers based on a traditional NBA team cycle. Because in 2021, they decided to go for it and assemble a good team because they'd been really bad for a long time. They hadn't made the playoffs since 2017, and even in 2017, they made the first round. They were an AC that got beat by the Celtics. They weren't very good. So after a few seasons of watching Zach LaVine drop 40 in losses, the Bulls decided that they were going to lay out for it and try to get some real talent into the organization. So before the trade deadline in 2021, the Bulls went and got Nikola Vucevic from the Orlando Magic, which sounds like a joke now, being that Vucevic is sort of an average center in the league who's kind of known for getting beat up by Embiid and Jokic. But at the time, believe me, Vucevic was hot. He'd been an all-star that year. He was averaging 25 points a game and 12 rebounds, and his shooting percentages were like Steph Curry level, man. I'm not kidding. Look at him. Vooch was gonna save the Bulls. All the Bulls had to give up was Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and a couple draft picks, because the Magic were gonna go enter their suffering phase. They'd been a bottom tier playoff team for a while, and it wasn't going anywhere, so they decided to enter purgatory and sell off all of their good players. And now the Magic have begun their ascent into basketball heaven, right? Made the playoffs as a 5th seed. Their ascent into heaven is actually a little bit ahead of schedule. Sometimes it pays to go to hell for a while, but don't stay too long. Now back to the Bulls. The Bulls had Vooch and they had LaVine. Not bad, right? The Bulls were back, baby. At the time, most people thought the Bulls were gonna make the playoffs, but unfortunately they didn't. As a matter of fact, they didn't even make the play-in that year. But now it's the off-season of 2021, and the Bulls were gonna do some real big moves. They were gonna pull in some major free agents, which they did. I'm not being sarcastic. They actually attracted a lot of good players, which is hard to do in free agency these days. First off, they got DeMar DeRozan, who signed a 3-year deal. The Bulls actually got lucky because the Lakers were gonna sign DeRozan, but they went and traded for Russ. So now the Bulls had Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. That's a lot of offense. But let's keep it real. These guys are not known for being defensive stoppers, are they? Luckily, the Bulls were able to sign Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball, 2 really good defenders. The Pelicans had let Lonzo walk that offseason. They weren't interested in re-signing him. I think things went sour there. And the Lakers didn't want to re-sign Caruso. They signed Taylor Horton Tucker instead. Ugh. Caruso even gave the Lakers first refusal rights. He wanted to stay a Laker, but the Lakers said, no, we want Taylor Horton Tucker and we don't want to spend a bunch of money. I have a feeling they went with Taylor Horton Tucker because he is a clutch client, and that is LeBron's agency. But whatever, Caruso signed a big ass contract and he's doing all right now. So now this team was looking stacked, right? They also had Patrick Williams and Kobe White, 2 draft picks with a lot of potential. The Bulls were now a competitive team. But here's the thing, even with these additions, they were just a competitive team. They weren't great. No one thought these guys were going to compete with the Bucks or the Celtics in the East. So why did they do all this? Why'd they spend all this money and give up all this draft capital to be a little bit above mid? They did it because they were tired of sucking. The Bulls had been in hell for years. The draft picks they were acquiring were not working out. The coaches they were bringing in were causing more problems and creating a lot of drama in the locker room. So they had the opportunity to pay a bunch of free agents more money than they probably would have made anywhere else and start a team over. They also had the opportunity to sign Billy Donovan, who had had a lot of success in Oklahoma City. So they went for it. The roster was good. It wasn't great, but they went for it. It was at least enough to make the Bulls relevant again. It was enough to get fans excited to go to the United Center, which hadn't been the case for a while. Now, it didn't really work out, though. The Bulls only made the playoffs 1 time over the last 3 years, mainly because Lonzo Ball has only played 35 games in the last 3 seasons. Ugh. But the team did drastically improve. They at least made the play-in the last 2 years. So I actually like this move as an organization. I don't see it as a failure. I don't see it as purgatory or hell, really. I think NBA hell is constantly playing in a perpetual state of rebuilding. The Kings literally had 16 seasons in a row where they did not make the playoffs, and they kept calling it a rebuilding phase. And it's really annoying to me when we look at teams like the Kings and the Pistons and we say, wow, they really don't know how to draft. Don't know how to draft. They get a lottery pick every year, and they're choosing a player who's speculated to go at the position that they're drafting him at. The trash teams in the NBA aren't trash because they don't know what players to pick. They suck because they're bad at running a sports franchise. They suck at business. And I don't like this because it shames the player and puts all the blame on him for not being successful. A lot of these guys are 18 and 19 years old. A lot of the success they have in the league is predicated on someone teaching them how to be successful. I think about Marvin Bagley, who has become a joke in the league. He was drafted in 2018 second overall, and now he's on his third team. And at the time, drafting Marvin Bagley second overall was not a dumb move. It wasn't considered boneheaded, even though Luka went third. I just don't think that Vlade Divac and the Kings had a plan. They didn't know what to do with Bagley. Bagley had coaches like Luke Walton and Alvin Gentry, guys that are referred to as carousel coaches. Coaches who have had head coaching jobs before, so their hiring makes them seem like safe bets. Even though if you look at their coaching record, they are expert losers. I believe the same thing is happening with the Hornets and the Pistons right now. The Pistons gave Monty Williams $78 million to be their head coach. He became the highest paid coach in NBA history. And in his inaugural season, the Pistons set the record for the longest losing streak in a single season. I'm not saying that Monty Williams isn't a good coach. I do not know enough about basketball to say that. All I'm saying is he's clearly not the right guy for this job. And he wasn't on the same page as the front office. He was playing guys like Killian Hayes, Isaiah Livers, Bojan Bogdanovic, guys that the front office didn't see being part of their future. How do I know this? Because all those guys either got traded or cut by the middle of the season. I think the Pistons just saw that Monty Williams had achieved some success with the Suns and thought some of that success would just rub right off on the Pistons. And it's a logical thought. It makes sense to me, but it shouldn't make sense to me because I don't know anything about managing a basketball team. And Cade Cunningham seems like a good guy and a good player, and I'm sure he wants to make the Pistons good. But I would not be surprised if he does not sign an extension in Detroit and he leaves as soon as he's an unrestricted free agent. These guys are winners, man. I'm sure it's very emotionally taxing to come out on the court and fail night after night. The Hornets are the same way to me. I don't think there's any hope for that organization. I don't know what they're doing. They've literally hired and fired the same coach in the last 6 years. I'm not kidding. Look it up. Steve Clifford was fired as head coach in 2018, and then they rehired him in 2022. And then he just stepped down as head coach a couple weeks ago. Apparently, he's moving into a front office role. The head coach to front office transition is what I call the let's just be friends of the NBA. And along with re-signing Miles Bridges after his domestic violence charge and subsequent restraining order violation, I get it. Miles Bridges is good. He's a good player. And he was still under contract with the organization. But given the timeline of events, it's pretty clear to me that the Charlotte Hornets did not care about Miles Bridges being a violent criminal and welcoming him back into their organization. It's funny to me, you have players like Christian Brown, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Peyton Watson, who were lower draft picks, and then people commend the teams that drafted them as like, wow, we really saw some diamond in the rough. I don't think they did. It's obvious to me that if a team like the Heat had drafted Ausar Thompson, we'd be talking about him just as much as we were talking about Brandon Podziemski. Being in basketball hell is being a part of an organization that has no plan. Owning a basketball team isn't like owning a textile company. Based on the way that the revenue is distributed amongst the teams, you can have a bad basketball team and still a profitable business. I think a good tell if your basketball team is run the right way is when teams are making conscious decisions that may seem arbitrary or maybe even counterintuitive. I think Masai Ujiri has real passion for the game and he loves being in the business of basketball. He went out on a limb and he traded for Kawhi, who only had one more year left on his deal, and it worked out. They won a championship, dude. He drafted Scotty Barnes over Jalen Suggs. A lot of people gave him crap for that. Then Barnes goes on to win Rookie of the Year and just became an all-star this year. I think him hiring first-time head coach Darko Rajakovic was not a business as usual decision. Most teams would have chose a guy off the rotating carousel of coaches that had just gotten fired, like the Suns, the Sixers, the Pistons, and eventually the Milwaukee Bucks did. Tim Conley of the Minnesota Timberwolves is a really great manager as well. Everyone was criticizing him for the Rudy Gobert trade and everything they had to give up to get him. Now look at the Timberwolves. They're good. So basketball purgatory is being bad temporarily, so you get a lot of draft picks, you open a lot of salary space, and maybe trade for a good player. While NBA hell is being a part of an organization that believes they're an NBA purgatory, but has been in a state of suffering for so long that it's become part of their identity and they don't even notice. Alright, thanks for being here. Like the video if you enjoyed it. If you didn't like it, go thumbs down on the video. If you have a recommendation for a video you'd like to see, again, this was a recommendation, so let me know. I'll probably do it. I might do it. I'll add it to the list. Be good to your mothers. Talk to someone about basketball. Need a corn dog.